This is festivalPass Stories, a podcast series is told by the people who create and make festivals come to life. You will go behind the stage, kitchen, or studio door to hear the stories of passion and inspiration that started some of the world's most beloved festivals. Hear the startup stories and how an idea went from what if to what's next. Okay, friends, welcome back. It is festivalPass Stories. We, of course, take you behind the stage, the studio, or the kitchen door to hear those stories of passion and inspiration that lead people to create these festivals and make them great. Now we're going to go behind the winemaker's door, if you will, or perhaps into the vineyard with my guest, Troy Bowen of the Colorado Natural Wine Week. Troy, let's start with 2020's most challenging question. I promised you this would be a nice, easy conversation, but I'm going to ask you a very tough question, which might take us the entire length of this interview or it might be brief. So here we go. I hope you're ready for it. How are you?
Woof. Well, yeah, I have some notes about that if you want me to go off of those. I've been thinking about that in my diary all morning. I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always interested in having conversations with other folks just about what we're all experiencing. I'm grateful, I'm humbled, and I'm happy. So I know it could be much worse. So we'll just keep it at that. How about that?
I love it. I love it. I was saying to somebody after a very long-winded response from myself on that the other day, I said, well, why don't I just boil it down to this? I'm healthy. My wife is healthy. Let's just be very, very thankful for that. I'm grateful, and so on. So you call yourself, according to your LinkedIn profile, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but you call yourself the Mouth Party Purveyor. I need to hear the story, either how you came up with that title or somebody said, Troy, I'm going to call you the Mouth Party Purveyor. If that's a title somebody gave you.
We're kind of a cheeky group of people that opened up this wine bar, myself and my business partner, Scott Nicole. And, as many startups or many entrepreneurs know, the kernels and what become the business can get really funny and can get really weird. There's a lot of late nights with a lot of dehydration and a lot of sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
And some of the things that come out of those nights are some of the best ideas you've ever had. And some of them should never see the light of day. Just to kind of go off of that for a second, to be honest, some of the weirder and ideas that got pushed to the side early on, COVID this time has actually helped give those proper due and at least give them a little bit of the light. But Mouth Party was just it was what we imagined a good night to be at the bar. And it was just trying to be a little bit irreverent and a little bit funny and be like a little bit sexy and understand that, listen, your mouth is the thing that's our focus of attention here. The rest of the body will follow suit if you do it right. And so we just started calling some of the nights mouth parties and saying that you should come down to our mouth party. And so
yeah, let's do it.
As that being the party, someone needs to be the purveyor. And so yeah. I was happy to take that stand,
After I saw your title, I did go on Indeed to see, they're not a sponsor of this podcast, so that's the last shout out they're going to get. But let's say I just went on a job search website and I searched for Mouth Party Purveyor, and there are sadly no other jobs available right now. So
I guess I better stick with this for at least a little bit longer until I can increase this the need for this job in the economy.
You can franchise it. Yeah, franchise it later on. But an excellent perspective. The excellent perspective you had to say that some of these great ideas that came out late night when you were, after you lock the door and you're just in there with your partners, that you've had some time during this shutdown to really flesh out. Anything in particular? I mean, I know these could be trade secrets and you don't want to reveal everything here to our millions of people watching at home. At least I hope millions of people watching at home. But is there anything that you said, yes, that is something that we can do, and let's just start on that now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in some ways it just made us shine a light on every idea we'd had and say, like, what was it that we wondered if it would work? There's no better time than now to find that out, because there's no, what are you going to risk at this point? We need to throw kind of everything at the wall. And I think in some ways, we've found our identity a lot more during this time than we had before because of that. So as an example, you know, we are a wine bar that's open every night for standard wine bar functions and for mouth parties in that respect. But we've always had a very fine eye tuned to education. So we always have offered classes at least once a week. And so we leaned into that quite a bit more, providing education even while we weren't able to be open. We really kind of dug in to find out how can we still give people a chance to think about wine and learn, even if they're at home or even if they can't come out or if they don't feel comfortable.
So you've been having virtual classes.
Yeah, very quickly, you know, once we were told to shut down our in-house dining, we shifted and did a couple of things that very day. And so we were able to still have takeout, and our education component was resurrected relatively quickly. So people would pick up from our takeout area some cheese pairings and little vials of wine, and everyone would go home and we'd have Zoom education classes just like we had before. We've done blind tasting classes for our members and for, you know, private guests and things like that. We've found ways of making this still fun and making a community out of this, which is really what we're about. We're a community building enterprise and a hospitality enterprise in which wine is the kind of catalyst and the glue. But we were able to kind of find those things back very quickly. And, you know, introducing monthly wine pairing dinners so basically pop-ups within our own restaurant. There's quite a few different things. We're working 4 times to make about the same amount of money, but there's a lot of folks that have that opportunity.
So you mentioned that you offered services for members. Is your wine bar, there's a membership to this, or is it open to the public? Or is it both?
It is. So we do have a membership, and we've had it since very early on. It was part of our business plan. It's just a nice way to have some people that have a little bit more access to some parts of Noble Riot's experience. And it's a way for us to be able to have some cash flow so that we can put on bigger things for them. But for a monthly membership fee, you're given discounts on food and wine. You're given first crack at events that we do. So any of these kind of pop-up dinners or off-site events. I mean, just before the shutdown, we had a trip to Corsica planned, winemaker visits and just a tour of the island, and that was a members event. And then as well as all of those discounts and privileges, you also get all of the classes for free. And so very quickly, if you just attend a couple classes a month, you're making up for that membership. And more than even we expected, it's become a very social time for all those members. They know each other. They hang out outside of Noble. They're not just people that kind of randomly overlap there. They come for the classes together and they hang out quite a bit. So it's become a very intimate and great group of people. And they're also the people that are most interested, I think, and most close to what we do. So anytime we have a new product or a new idea, they're the first to get it, partly because they can feel more access, but in a lot of ways it's product testing for us to say, how does this land? Do you even think this is a good idea? And if so, why? And if not, maybe we will never tell anyone else. But it's been drastic. It's been such a good thing for us. And they helped us a lot during the middle times in which we had to close down to in-house dining. They certainly helped.
That's great. Now, it's funny, people late night at bars come up with ideas like to open up other bars. Like, we should open up a bar together. You did open up a bar, and now you're coming up with ideas to improve your bar late at night. The whole thing comes full circle.
Yeah, the point is stay up and drink and come up with ideas. Let yourself be free with the ideas late at night.
Separate the wheat. Yeah, we'll separate the wheat from the chaff tomorrow when we're over some eggs and hot sauce. So you were the founder, well, in partnership with other people, but you were essentially the founder of the Colorado Natural Wine Consortium, which was founded around 2013, 2014.
That's correct.
You had your local wine distributors together with that. I believe it was Harvest Wine and Natural Wine Company, Empire Noble selections, which sounds like where your wine bar came out of, maybe with Noble. And then, of course, classic beverage companies. The question I have is, from what I've seen, winemaking is, and I've been to vineyards and I've seen the high tech process that goes behind it, but it's no longer just fermented grape juice. We're talking about enhancements with technology, where we're at a point where the terroir has been stripped away. How is the natural wine movement, and is it even a movement, or is it just something that you're focused on? But if there is a natural wine movement, how is it bringing back wine? How is it bringing wine back to basics?
Yeah, I love that. I always love the opportunity to talk about this. You hit on a lot of good points there. And the point that I want to focus on is that wine is a lot easier to make now for a lot more people than it was, say, 30 or 50 years ago. Back then, you needed a lot of equipment and a lot of knowledge and a lot of history and a lot of land to make a good wine. It's just that simple. And with winemaking technology having changed, with agricultural technology changing, so many of those barriers to entry have come much further down. And so to the point where, I mean, today I could go right now and find some way to make wine here. There's enough places and people to do the things that needed to be done before that it's accessible to just about anyone. And so with that, you have a lot more ideas coming in. You have a lot more ways to shape a wine based on how you want it to taste in your mind. That's great in a lot of ways, and there's nothing wrong with that in a lot of ways. But what it has done is kind of it's democratized the making of it, but kind of shielded the whole enterprise from this very natural agricultural start. So in so many ways, it really is just fermented grape juice, and how can we bring it back to that, and why? My ideas about it are that wine shouldn't be always something that's a processed food item. I enjoy my occasional Dorito and my occasional Cheeto, and I don't say that you should never have those. But do I want to always eat corn or potatoes in those ways? No. Sometimes I want to go to a nice restaurant that takes a fresh one and makes it and shows off why it's so good this time of year and why it's so special to the cycle that humans exist within, which is the harvest cycle and the produce cycle, right? And I feel like when you have a chance to taste a tomato that has been just picked from a garden, that's very different than a tomato flavoring that's been added to something, right?
Sure.
The same is true of wine, and I think the people who make these wines and the grapes that are used to make the wines have a lot to say just by nature of being there and exhibiting the amazing miracle that is like taking a tiny seed and turning it into a grape and turning it into this wine that speaks so many volumes. So long and short of it is, I think that there's a place for each of them, but I don't think that the natural processes should be overlooked. So I advocate tirelessly for these wines, but also the people that are willing to make these wines, because it takes a lot more discipline and it takes a lot more training to make these wines well, versus just seeing what happens with the grapes and fixing any problems once you get into the winery. It's a lot harder to make a natural wine. So that's the long answer.
That is, and I love it. And I think our guests are going to love that as well. I mean, personally, I don't think of wine when I think of Colorado. I think of beer for Coors and another non-sponsor. So stop. Right. I got to stop giving these shout outs. But like you said, you can kind of start, you can start wine, you can start growing grapes or something anywhere. And, you know, I grew up in New Jersey, and no one would ever think of New Jersey for wine. And New Jersey's put out some decent wines. A friend of mine has, they've got a vineyard, they got a little family vineyard, and they put out some, you know, nice, they're not going to put out world-class Cabernet, but they're going to put out some pretty nice summer wines and, you know, lighter whites. But then out in the Hamptons, they are making Cabernet, they're making
absolutely
they're making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and great Chardonnay out in on the East End and
Finger Lakes.
Yeah, upstate New York. My sister lives there in Ithaca, and we went up there. I was part of a group, an Irish group called the Wine Geese, and we did a Finger Lakes trip last year, and we did wine and cider tasting, and it was
That's a good time.
wine, and everybody took wine home. Don't like that word Oenophile. It just sounds so odd, but I mean, you would think with something as wonderful as wine, they would come up with such a better word. And the way it's spelled, like Oenophile, it looks like
it's not an easy one.
Almost like if there's an Oenophile on your street, they should have to knock on your door and say, "I'm an Oenophile." Right. Thank you, because we have children here.
Right.
It just looks, the spelling is odd. The whole thing is just very, very, very weird. But so there actually is besides wine bars that are bringing in wine from California and other places, and there is actually a wine scene in Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado actually has a pretty extensive wine history, interestingly enough, and it started before Prohibition and was continued through Prohibition, as the kind of medicinal wine, similar to how California experienced theirs. And so there's actually a pretty good history here that stretches more than a century. And especially in the last 10 years, there's been some changes and some growers that are paying a little bit more attention to how the land is. And we're finding a new crop of, the winemakers can be great, but if they don't have the good grapes to kind of start from, it doesn't matter so much. So I think in the last 10 years, especially, even more folks have become attentive to the needs of the land versus the needs of the guest, the customer. Yeah. So instead of just trying to grow Cabernet wherever you can, just because people are going to like it, we found that there's some other grapes that do really well out here, and they're growing them better. And we have a winery that is certified biodynamic and has been since 2005. We have some people that are really trying to take what's given to us instead of trying to put onto the land what they want. So, yeah, I think there's some good things happening, certainly.
What grapes are doing well in Colorado?
Yeah, so there's a few different AVAs, a few different, viticultural areas that will produce grapes, and most often it's on the western slope. And in that area, there's, there is some Cabernet, there's Tempranillo, there's Mourvèdre, and some of those are working really well. There's some investigations with a couple of Italian grapes, one called Giraldago that's found some really nice perches here. And then further south in the West Alps AVA, which is a very high altitude AVA, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Riesling do really well down there. Short growing seasons in general, but really some interesting things coming out. So
that's excellent. I look forward to trying some of it. So you are the co-founder of the Colorado Natural Wine Week, which of course had to be postponed like everything else, like life this year.
Sort of, yeah.
But how have you stayed in touch with your loyal supporters and the people that would have been there?
Yeah. We did have to postpone the majority of that week, but we did continue some programming. So we did actually have a virtual winemaker talk. So we had some winemakers and a lot of our loyal fans able to kind of go into the same virtual room, and we had some talks about natural wine and about where it's going and where it is and what's coming up. So in that way, we were still able to engage with folks, and we're looking forward to doing a similar program in the next year. We're still nailing down the date, but we've had a couple meetings, and we are going to do more virtual programming. We're going to have some opportunities for restaurants and retail to kind of reach out in some ways that maybe it's not a group of 150 or 400 people in the same room, but you'll still be able to have, a wine selected from a retailer and a dish selected from a local restaurant to bring home and have on your own. Join a virtual class through that. So that's how we're planning for the future. And as we move through it, we've kept in touch. We have programming that a lot of the folks that I have seen at the Natural Wine Week for years come to the bars. They come to Noble Riot. So I can kind of help sustain that interest and to talk to them and have their conversations there, which is really helpful too. So between those things, we're staying present one way or another.
So how many people would have attended? I'm going to call it CNWW for short, but that's I'm sure the cool kids who attend year after year, they call it CN Dubs. But
absolutely. See and doubled up. Of course.
How many people would have been there if we could have been live in person?
Yeah, this was going to be our, I think, last year would have been, I think, our 8th year doing it. And we saw growth quite a bit every year. It's hard to kind of put a specific number since the whole week had so many different events behind it. But the crowning event in the middle of the week always was the grand tasting, which was a chance for, 25 winemakers and wineries to put their wines on display and to have the public and the trade come through and taste through everything and sample. And for those, we'd have probably about 100 to 150 trade folks come in at the first part of the day. And then I think 300 or so consumers come through. So we're looking at 450 to 500 folks that would have probably come through that event. And then who knows how many throughout Denver and Boulder that would have attended the other events throughout the week.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then how many events would you have hosted, I should say? Everything
Sure.
sounds post-mortem these days.
I know.
How many events would you have hosted during CN Dubs?
Yeah, in the before times, there would have been at least a dinner every night of the week, or an event every night of the week between retail tastings in the store, winemaker dinners. So with the grand tasting, I'd say there were probably 10 to 15 events throughout the week, because there's at least a couple, probably even more. There's probably about 20 for the week spread out throughout the Denver metro area and Boulder.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
It's great. It's something to put on the calendar for next year. And so our viewers and listeners know part of your resume. You are a graduate of the Sommelier Society of America, so congratulations on that. But
Lots of mouthfuls in the wine industry. But yes.
Mouthfuls of wine, words, everything.
Yes, I graduated from Sommelier Society of America in 2008. It was a good program.
So what does it take to get there? And on top of that, I've heard about there are very few master somms. So I guess a couple of questions. What does it take to become a member of this society? The courses you have to pass? How many of there are you? And then how many of those master sommeliers are there?
Yeah, good questions. The Sommelier Society of America is a independent organization that helps certify sommeliers. And so of the ones that are available, there's quite a few in the country. I think the most known are probably the Court of Master Sommeliers and the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, based out of the UK.
Okay.
And so those are the ones that people are most familiar with, and that you'll get some of those echelons that people are more used to, like level 1, level 2, Master Sommelier. My organization was only New York based, which I liked. They had established, I think, in 1953. So a group that was really committed to education for quite a while already. And my course of study was a 22-week program. So it was about waking up and drinking wine every Monday at 9 a.m., which was fascinating. Yeah. But that one basically comprises everything you're going to learn in a level 1 and level 2 at the same time, over a course of time. So with the other ones, usually you study, and then there's just a test. And whether you've done the test or not, whether you've done the studying or not, you have the test to determine if you've done well enough. And then the Master Sommelier program and some of those higher echelon ones are really much more about like doctorate level education. You're writing theses and doing research and getting to investigate parts of the wine world that only a few people have really investigated. And so there are certainly more and more master sommeliers now. I don't know what the exact number is, but it is a small amount, and it takes an incredible amount of study. And I know quite a few people that are in the running for it and that have been attempting it for years. It's usually something that you don't get right away. So it's
it comes with experience, right? There has to be a certain amount of years under your belt. You can't just be like, Doogie Howser sommelier.
Right. I mean, it's something that they want commitment to the industry and to show that you are a part of that community.
That's good.
And that you're going to contribute in some form of research or knowledge or education. Yeah. Great programs, all of them, for different reasons. And there are certainly some great ways to get into this industry more, although, you could also just drink, and that would provide you with a lot of interesting education of its own too.
Excellent. Last year, you opened up Noble Riot, and I know you said you were open for takeout, but here in New York, actually today, they're reopening restaurants to 25% indoor capacity, and they have extended outdoor dining year round.
Yeah.
What is Colorado? And everybody's angry at politicians and everything else. And today, just before this, I went out to get a cup of coffee, and I had to take a double take. I look into the restaurant, and there's people inside. I'm like, what are they doing in there?
Yeah.
They're sitting inside a restaurant. It was crazy how it really made me think like that for a second. So that's where we are in New York, and knock on wood that it goes well, and they can go to 50% within a month, which is the next plan in November, that they'll be at 50%. What's the plan for? And I'm sure you've read lots of stories, and the New York scene, so it's how hard it is for the places to survive anyway. What is Denver doing for you and your colleagues in the industry, and what is the plan, I guess, is the best way to ask.
We were forced to shut down in-house dining in March, and then in June we were able to open for 50% capacity, and they established some extended outdoor seating.
Okay.
And so we have a patio that we had applied for and gotten approved last November. So we have some that's already ours, no matter what the situation. Yeah. Then we were given some expansion space as well. So we have that. And Denver is a very seasonal, winter is not nearly as tough as it seems from the outside. It's a pretty nice. We don't tell everyone that, but it's like
you're trying to keep the population a little bit lower. You're like, Denver's awesome. We're start keeping it a secret.
Right.
You'll have 3 million people move in after this, I'm sure.
That was 2013, man. We had 10,000 people a month moving here for the marijuana helped that a little bit. So I've been through that, and it's great. So we have a lot of patio space. My biggest concern right now is how to, because that's very popular, and that's where people want to be. Once it gets cooler, we're getting heaters and trying to have some covering somehow.
That is, your industry is the hospitality industry, so you want to keep it hospitable. I understand.
Yeah, exactly.
I can draw a line between those two.
Right. So we're investigating that, and we're investigating how to utilize some other spaces that we have access to, and just figuring it out one day at a time. I mean, there's a new calamity every day, but there's also new answers. So I think we just yesterday were given the ability to expand that outdoor program for a year. So it was about to be canceled October 31st, but they've extended that to October 31st of 2021. So that might help. We'll see. Hopefully it's a mild winter.
Well, that's good. So speaking of a struggling food and wine scene, it sounds like Denver is onto something good, and I hope that continues. But New York is hopefully onto something good here, and will continue as well. But you started your hospitality career in New York City, in my city, 15 years ago. The business at that time, restaurants were opening and closing as they always do in regular times. It's a tough business without having a global pandemic, but the businesses were thriving. New places were open. The club scene was hot. All sorts of things were happening in 2005. Where were you working then?
Yeah, I was working as a stage manager. So I was traveling a lot, on tour a lot. And when I came back home from tours, I'd work at this cafe called 1063 in Long Island City. And at the time, Long Island City was very small. This was the coffee shop in the neighborhood. And then there was, just cab repair places and elevator repair places in a couple of condo buildings. And we all know how different that is today.
Sure.
But the woman that owned that cafe, Talitha, she had kind of dropped the hint that she was looking to open a wine store soon. And my stage management work was kind of in a middle in between place. And I said, if you open that, I'd be really interested to work with you. I wasn't very into wine, but I knew enough to choose, Ecco Domani versus Yellowtail if I went to the wine store. Yes. I had just had that much above everything else. And so she opened that up.
The starter kit.
Right, exactly. You have to go somewhere. When Ecco Domani is the best choice, you still have a long way up to go, though. So, but
they're not a sponsor of us either. So
yeah, that wasn't really a good shout out anyway.
No more shout outs for Ecco or Yellow or whoever.
Right. So she did open that wine store, and it was focused all on small production wines made by humans, so very small production, hand harvested, most often biodynamic and organic wines. And so that was my launch into wine at all. It was starting with these winemakers and feeling really like I was working for the winemaker above all else. And so she kept that store running. It's still up. It's just not in Long Island City. It's now in Williamsburg, but it's been open the whole time. And she runs a great store, and it's awesome. And I'm happy to have that be my ancestral homeland in the wine industry. After that, I worked for a natural wine importer called Jenny and Francois. Jenny and Francois started that business in 2000, which is insane to think that an all-natural portfolio was being brought in 20 years ago already.
Wow.
But she was integral in just helping me understand what it meant to be natural and to have winemakers coming through every year and to really engage with those folks and understand their stories. And she had participated in a New York Natural Wine Week. And it was such a thriving, interesting combination. And it was just so great to have so many people from around the world come and share stories. That was really what kind of sparked the idea for me.
Yeah, and you must be getting a little homesick hearing the honking of truck horns. You'll probably hear there's a firehouse right outside my window. Yeah. You'll probably hear the local ladder,
nice,
in their engine pretty soon. So I hope you're getting a little nostalgic during this call.
Great.
Hopefully somebody will tell somebody, how they really feel about them, and you get that real New York experience. But
exactly.
There are people back on the streets, which is nice, and it's
great.
A little bit of, it's not like I miss traffic, but it's nice to see a little traffic. So, so we're coming back, man. But
so good to hear.
I know we're almost out of time here, so I just want to ask you a couple questions in my section I like to call COVID Confidential. So yes, exactly. Welcome to the lounge. We need some theme music for that.
Yeah.
Besides the hard life lessons that the pandemic has taught us about health and business and politics and everything else, have you been able to unlock any kind of secret power in your life? I know you're in the hospitality business, but have you suddenly realized that that you don't just have a love for wine, perhaps you really like to cook, or are you natural at languages? I've been cooking. I've been trying to learn a little bit more Spanish. But is there some sort of secret power all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I'm pretty good at the piano or something like that?
Yeah, I think, it's funny because I think a lot of us, I was fortunate enough to have my business continue into COVID. And so I poured, at first I thought I did the same thing where it's like, okay, well, here comes the bread making, here comes the second language, here comes all these other things. Maybe, am I going to learn Portuguese finally? I don't know. But I honestly just turned so much of that back into my business, not because I'm a workaholic necessarily, but because it's the thing that I want to do so badly. It's my creative outlet, and it's my problem solving forum, and it's an arena for so many different things. So in some ways, I didn't do the COVID thing that a lot of people had the opportunity to. I didn't kind of just take some time and focus on something else. I really just bore down into this more, which is great. I think it's actually helped me discover that some of our ideas as a team were relevant. They weren't just something to put in the corner. I've gained a lot more confidence in my team. I've found that the identity of our space came out of this a lot more. I feel like I just know the business a lot better. So I guess if anything, I've improved my relationship with my both my business partner team and my staff, and gotten to know my business better.
Yeah.
So I guess I've done some relationship work, if anything.
Well, that's a bit of a superpower right in itself. And you used your time wisely. And I've heard other people say it, and I was saying it myself, that this is an opportunity for a bit of a reset in your personal life and your business life. If you own a business, this is time to maybe step back and look at your data for a little bit. You think you know your business really well, and then you step back and you're like, well, it turns out that I'm wasting way too much time on stuff I thought was so important, but it turns out I'm losing money and losing time on that. So refocus. So well done to you.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Yeah. So how can people find out more? Now everybody's going to want to go to Denver because like those 10,000 people a day or a week were coming in 2013. But how can we find out more about, one, Noble Riot, and two, C and Dub's Colorado Natural Wine Week?
Sure. Colorado Natural Wine Week, it's the website is CO Natural Wine Week. And
CO, like Colorado, CO Natural Wine Week.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or you can just Google that and it should pop up. Luckily, there aren't 1,000 other Colorado Natural Wine Weeks hopping around the internet. Noble Riot, you can certainly go to our Instagram, which is Noble Riot Denver, or on the web, just look up Noble Riot, NOBLERIOT, and come follow us on Instagram and see what we're up to. There's always something fun, and we should have some news about when Colorado Natural Wine Week 2021 will be and what it'll look like. So all of those things are in the works right now.
Excellent. Well, Troy, you are crushing it like you also crush grapes. So we look forward to following up with you when the CN Dubs Fest is back in person, hopefully next year. And friends, say goodbye to Troy Bowen. Thank you so much, Troy, for your time. I can't wait to get back out to Denver. I love that city. And I look forward to seeing our friends at Levitt Pavilion and then having a glass of wine at Noble Riot. So thanks, friends. We'll see you next time on festivalPass Stories.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is festivalPass Stories, a podcast series is told by the people who create and make festivals come to life. You will go behind the stage, kitchen, or studio door to hear the stories of passion and inspiration that started some of the world's most beloved festivals. Hear the startup stories and how an idea went from what if to what's next.